Okay. Today we're going to talk about classes and objects again, and mostly we're going to focus on child classes and parent classes and having classes interact with each other or objects interact with each other within definitions so that you can define an object that has an effect on another object, which sounds harder than it really is. So what I've got here is a text-based adventure game, and I have a few objects defined. And what you're going to do at the end of this is do a lab where you're going to create at least one child class and have that child class have some sort of effect on the player class, whether that's calling a method in the player class or having an effect on its attributes. So first, here's my player class. It's just a basic class. In the initialization, we have a name, we print the name, we have a location, and we have an empty list, which is the inventory, because of course at the beginning of the game you don't have anything. We're going to collect those things. And then I've also called the getInventory function just to have the function, just to have the inventory printout, which it should be empty, and so it will say, you know, sorry, you don't have any items, let's go. So I have a couple of methods for getting inventory, for using items, for moving around the board. I didn't include these methods in the framework that I gave you to work with, but this is just to show you some examples of methods that you can use. What we're going to focus on is not the player class necessarily, but our game item class here. So I've created a very basic game item class. It initializes only with its location, so that's the only attribute that this game item class has. And then I created, based on that game item class, some child classes. So if you remember, to create a child class, we create the name of the class, and in parentheses we put the parent class, the name of the class that this class is going to be based on. And then we're going to use a very basic way of inheriting all of the attributes and methods of our game item class. And the way we're going to do that is simply to call the initialization of our game item class. There are many other things to know about inheriting and inheriting methods, but we're going to keep it simple for right now. So you're going to inherit the initialization, which is going to be the location. Every item needs a location in this case, in this game. And then the only thing that I've added here, this is the simplest of my options, is I've added the name of our item, which will then get added to our inventory, but we'll worry about that later. And then I've defined a couple of very simple methods, found and use, which simply print some things to the screen. So they don't actually do a whole lot. When you create your child class, I would like for you to do a little bit more than this. This is just very simple to show you how these work. You can start with something simple like this, and in fact I recommend it just so you can see that your methods are working. And then you need to figure out, like, if you find a wand, what else can you do? How else can you interact with it? My treasure item is a little bit more complicated. I have a found option just like I have in my wand. However, I also call an unlock method, which then does some other things to it. So we call the unlock method, which then chooses an item from a list, and then you can use it. And then my final item here, my final child class, is a creature that can be either friendly or unfriendly. If it's friendly, it simply prints to the screen that this creature is very happy to have found you and wants to follow you around, and you can give it a name. If it's mean, however, I want the player to be able to, say, use their wand or something on it. Maybe feed the creature, I don't know. I haven't thought through that whole thing. In order to be able to access these methods that the player, I need to pass in a variable that's going to stand for the instance of the player object. So I've called it player, which makes the most sense. So I'm passing in an argument here in addition to my self argument called player. That then gives me access to the methods and attributes associated with the player object, so that I can call the useItem method, or I can change the happiness attribute. So in this case, I'm subtracting a couple of points from my happiness because I've run into a mean creature. I can do both if I want to. So the way that you do this is simply to pass in this argument, which is a variable that will be the instance of the player object, which you're going to create at some point. And in fact, I don't have it created down here, but you would create it in this way. So now I have this player instance which gets passed in to the mean method here when necessary, so that then I can access those methods and attributes. So what you're going to do, what your task is to create a game item based on the game item class, and you're going to have that game item interact with our player class in some way, whether it's simply to update your attributes to change them in some way, or if it is to run a function, a method that's associated with the player object. And in order to do that, you will probably need to add some attributes. I don't want you to necessarily stick with these simple ones that I have. You might want to add happiness and hunger and things like that, and you might need to add a method as well. So you're going to create a child class that will become part of the game, and to do that you might need to add some things to the very basic framework that I've given you. And that is our review of objects.